She is a skyrocketing name in the tennis industry, and we're going to tell her story on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and the USTA. This is marketing manager at Universal Tennis. It is Nina Pantic. You know her on Twitter. She is an outspoken voice for the sport, has done so much work as an editor, as a storyteller, a host, doing commentary. She's a Swiss Army knife in the business, and she's on Twitter at Nina Pantic1. And we're going to learn about her tennis journey, but we're also going to step outside of that. It's not just her courtship on the tennis court, but her drive, her competitive edge, and how she uses that in all areas of her life. And Nina, first of all, I appreciate you doing this. And I wanted to start here. And a question that you probably did not see coming, assuming you came on and were thinking, okay, we're going to talk about my life. But I saw that you rode a camel in Doha. And I want to say the challenges that presented to you were what in you doing that?
First of all, I'm honored to be here. That was a very flattering intro. I'm beyond my ego is boosted. First, the Doha thing, I went to Doha 3 times, covering the ATP and WTA events. They had those huge events there. And I'm the kind of person who just wants to do the thing you're supposed to do in the place you're at. And what I noticed was Doha has a couple of very signature excursions you're supposed to do. One is these sand dunes. You go in this car and you drive around, you try and snowboard it, sandboard it. And then there was the camels. So yeah, the camels was a dream. I had to do it. The first time I got there, I didn't think I'd ever go back, honestly. So yeah, it was amazing. And it's really jarring because you're way higher than you think you are. Like it's really high and it's really uncomfortable. So that's important to keep in mind. I've seen some pros have done it as well. So I'm sure they understand. And you're on it for like 1 minute. You go down the sand, you come back. It's not like I didn't do a big, weekend away on a camel. You can, but I did not.
You didn't lead a caravan and spend a weekend in some oasis in the middle of the desert, but you still have a good story. And as we focus on your story as a whole, so I forgot to mention, obviously you played college tennis and you're now in the tennis industry and tennis media. The instincts, the competitive drive that you had on the court as a player, how do you find that sort of patterns itself in what you do now in a way?
The biggest thing is having accountability and responsibility and the maturity to get things done at certain deadlines. I think you learn that a lot as a college athlete. You have to really manage your time so well. And maybe you don't learn it your freshman year, but by your senior grad year, you've got it figured out. So time management and accountability is probably the biggest things I took from being a student athlete, and just kind of being able to get things done quickly because you're like, I don't have time to really procrastinate or dilly-dally or you just want to be efficient. So I think that's the best part. And I also think you have a work ethic that maybe someone else doesn't. You find a way to get things done that maybe someone who hasn't had that past thinks is feasible. Like, you're also going to work out. You're also going to get this done. You're also going to do like a personal life and make things work that maybe someone who hasn't had that background would think is possible, but it's really not that crazy.
Along the lines of your work ethic, in seeing what you're doing, I just have this premonition that you're just going to make it, because I can tell that you're a grinder and you're a go-getter and things are going to ultimately work the way you want and are working the way you want. Behind the scenes though, Nina, what does that work ethic look like from you that people don't see in terms of the work that you put in to grow your name, grow your brand, and to show your love for the sport?
Yeah, it just depends on the day. Like right now, I'm focused on working at Universal Tennis. That's my priority, but I still kind of have my hands in a few other pots in tennis. And I still want to make sure that I'm putting myself out there as a voice in tennis, even though I'm not particularly doing like straight up match reporting anymore, which was a really easy way to kind of stay connected. So it's about finding the opportunities that make sense. Keeping my eye out on things that might work for me and putting my name out in a lot of different situations and like getting rejected a lot. I mean, that's kind of part of the world you're in. I'm on a committee with the Tennis Hall of Fame, the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And that happened last year, kind of one of those opportunities that you immediately would say yes to. It's a volunteer position and it's really rewarding, and it's fully just on your own free time and meeting with other committee members and trying to get things done for the Hall of Fame. But that's something I'm doing on top of my work with Universal Tennis. So it's just about saying yes to things that make sense, being really candid with your current employers, making sure everyone's on the same page when you're doing podcasts and shows representing the company, but you're also talking about yourself and making sure that everyone is in agreement that we're all on the same goal. We're all trying to grow the game of tennis. And I think I have something to add to the sport and the tennis sphere. And I want to make sure that I'm still kind of doing that and like being true to myself and making sure that I'm not, wasting my potential. That's like a really big thing also from college tennis. Like you hate to have regrets, you hate to waste your potential. So just keep trying.
One of the yeses that you said to, in terms of saying yes to, that is a conversation you had with Roger Federer. If I'm not mistaken, you had taken this red eye. So here you are, you're going over to interview Roger Federer, and you're having this, you use the word rewarding, and this had to have been a rewarding moment for you in your career, having a sit down with him and talking to him. The aura of his presence, what did you learn about him in that moment that you would have never learned in all the matches of his that you've watched?
God, I look back at that. I'm like, I must have been so not even disheveled, just like such a young, I would have been like 26, such a young kid. He must have been just like, I don't know. He did so many interviews that day with different reporters, maybe like 5 back to back to back to back. And I thought I was so interesting and asking such exciting questions. There's no way I was. What I learned about him is that he, I guess the word would be like, he's really aware of his surroundings. He knows who's in the room, who he's meeting with. He's not like just going to show up and be a vessel. He's really engaged with each person. And yeah, it was an appearance for Wilson, so it has a little bit more stake in it for him. And he was launching that all black, one of his many rackets, but it was the all black one back, I think, 2015. So like he was really aware of who was in the room, and he would say people's first names, and he would recognize journalists from before, and he would say hi and ask them how they were doing and follow up questions, which was surprising. I thought he would just come in like a superstar and say nothing and sit down and answer questions, to be honest. So I was really amazed at how down to earth he was and how he connected with human beings that, in my opinion, should matter nothing to him.
Nina Pantic is with me. She is on Twitter at Nina Pantic1. I'm Bryan Fenley on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So to take a metaphor from tennis and looking at your post-playing career and to say your love 40 to winning a game in terms of overcoming something. So you go from a moment where you're down and you're behind at love 40 and you find a way to fight back and win the game. How do you feel like there's a moment post-playing where you can sort of tap into that mindset where you've been able to overcome something like that?
Oh, there's tons of instances. Like I said, I mentioned that you get rejected a lot when you're trying to chase certain roles and positions or opportunities in the tennis world. That's a big part of you to bounce back. You might get ghosted by somebody. I was trying to do some freelance work last year, or even I started in 2020 during the pandemic, doing some freelance work, commentary, trying to get some hosting jobs, some like other side jobs. And a few of them land and it's unbelievable. A few of them come into your lap and it's amazing. But a lot of the times you're reaching out and people are initially interested and then they ghost you. So you have to be able to bounce back. And I think in terms of fighting back, like, yeah, I had a position at Tennis Channel that I was at last year, and then that position changed and I switched over to Universal Tennis. It was a 3-month gap or so, but that was probably the biggest, comeback is dramatic, but like, the biggest hurdle where you're like, okay, I have to adjust what I thought I was going to be doing here. I have to adjust my game plan for what I was hoping to be doing and switch over and switch gears and hopefully come back from love 40 and win the game and do things better than I ever could have dreamed. But I think a big part of this career, and I'm sure you've had it too in tennis, is just understanding that there's different ways to do things and there's different opportunities always around the corner, and being able to pick yourself up and like fight back and make things work and just try again. As long as, what I've learned is, as long as you're maintaining relationships, I think being able to speak with people, even if it's Roger Federer or, it's a volunteer at a local tournament, in New York City, you want to make sure you're making connections. Not so much that you're like trying to, get something out of people, but like you're just maintaining connections and making sure that, they can always reach you, can always reach them. And you want to, learn from other people and see, things might line up where you're offering opportunities to somebody you met years ago, or they're offering it to you because you've maintained your network. And I've enjoyed that the most, I think, in tennis, especially the past year. Like I've really, really built on trying to maintain relationships and be available and, always be candid and honest with people about certain things and make things like a really healthy environment.
How far back do you trace that resilience that you're discussing?
I mean, it's challenging. I mean, like my background's interesting, right? Because I'm Serbian born. I moved to Zimbabwe as a little kid. I moved to Canada. I picked up tennis really young because my dad started, he became a tennis fanatic in his mid 30s. So it was a sport I started really young. And I think our background is unique in that we were trying to get to America when I was 11 years old, like a really impressionable age. So I think you learn that you need to let certain things go, and you need to work on yourself. You need to control the things you can control is like a big part as well, because sometimes things you really can't. So I think having a really good family support system as a young age when I was trying to go pro was a big influence on me. And just part of it might honestly be seeing that things aren't going to turn out the way you thought and being able to adjust. Like I thought I was going to go pro, and I just switched to college. I thought I would spend more time in LA, and then I was like, you know what, that's not going to work for me. And I moved to Mizzou for grad school. I switched from Tennis Channel to Universal Tennis. Like these things are things that could break you down and could crush you and make you want to just quit tennis completely, or you just adjust and see what more you can give.
Yeah, that versatility in the bounce back that you have. You see instances of that happening over the course of your career in multiple ways. And I guess, where do you think tennis would be in your life? What it would mean to you, what it would stand for, if not for your dad falling in love with it in his 30s?
It's crazy. I honestly, I don't know if I would have picked it up casually. I mean, I look now and I see, tennis is one of the most obvious successful choices for women. It's the highest prize money you could ever get. The lifestyle obviously is challenging, but it's alluring. So I don't know if I would have just casually picked it up. I casually picked up a lot of sports though. I was into gymnastics. I ran track and field. I don't know what I was thinking there. I threw shot put. Like I did things that, I tried everything. So would I have naturally fallen into tennis? Maybe. Would I have fallen into it so seriously and trained every day as an 8-year-old without my dad's passion? Probably not. Like that's, I quit gymnastics at 9. Like that's normal. I played different instruments. I quit all of them. To me, that's normal. So I think he was a massive influence, and without him, I don't see that happening the way it did. And maybe I would have been like a high school D3 player, which is okay too. That's great.
How often, when he was coaching you up when you were a child, do you still hear those words to this day, and sort of the things that he taught you at that age when you were on the court with him, and that you find are suitable and, apply to you nowadays?
Oh, I do certain things that I'm like, oh, I got that from him, from the way he would coach. He would he was really organized. He's a math professor. So he would organize books, and each book would have all the different drills we did. And he wouldn't just write the drill. He would draw out the graphic, really, really detailed, attention to detail, super clean, super organized. And these are things that I catch myself doing. Like I'm really organized. Things have to be in their place, even if it's online, desktops, Google Drives. So yeah, you see certain things, but then I was so young. I switched coaches to other coaches once I moved to Florida. So around 12, 13, he was just kind of there. Obviously he was a massive support system, but I had other coaches who also had different influences. So yeah, it's fun to look back and see all that. He still has all those books, which is wild.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nina Pantic is with me on Twitter at Nina Pantic1. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. You've told a lot of stories. You've interviewed so many athletes. And I can only imagine, Nina, that some of them had to have been some of them more emotionally compelling, emotionally, where you can empathize with whatever they were talking about, whatever they were open with. If you were to go back and in all the great conversations you've had with tennis players in the industry, and you were to look at a story that you were able to tell on a podcast platform or an interview that most emotionally resonated with you or hit you, what would that be? A conversation, a transparent moment that you were able to dig out of an athlete?
I've done a lot of interviews and players of all levels, people that you would say are famous, people who are not. And some of the most interesting were maybe people who weren't the famous ones, but I will name someone famous because it's more fun. Jeannie Bouchard was actually possibly the most interesting because she was at World Team Tennis in West Virginia when we did the COVID pandemic lockdown version of World Team Tennis. It was 3 weeks. We all became best friends, loosely. And I did a few podcasts because it made sense. And she was just very candid, and it surprised me a little bit. I mean, I know she's younger than me, but I know that she, is a very young experienced player who's been on tour for so like over a decade and has been through such dramatic ups and downs that you kind of feel a little bit anxious to poke at her. Like, I don't want to make anyone upset who I'm going to hang out with for 3 weeks. So it was nice to hear that she was really aware of her story and really like in tune with what happened and like how careers changed. So that was one of the most interesting. Has she said these things on other podcasts and shows? I'm sure she has. But it was just me and her in a room, and like, you know, it was a really revealing insight into what she's thinking, and I really like enjoyed her, and I really liked her, which I think is something people have lost along the way. People hate on her, and it's just unfair. So yeah, that was one of my most interesting ones. And then Evan King, surprisingly, he also was one of the most. Yeah,
Michigan,
because he had a tough story because he's kind of debating, you know, do I quit tennis? You know, do I focus on doubles? I've been grinding. I mean, I'm closing in on 30. So different players have different perspectives. And I like when players just kind of are more casual and really, really speak to you like you're having a normal conversation amongst friends versus just, you know, press media answers. So there's been a lot of different people.
When you have those conversations with them, what is your approach that you have found that usually enables the most open, transparent dialogue, where you're able to get them to really feel comfortable, feel safe, and then they're able to open up in a really beautiful way, which is certainly what you're aiming to do in the conversation?
Yeah, I think part of it was I had Irina Falcone, an actual like active player at the time, as my co-host. So it was really important because she set the tone, because she's also a player. Either she was just finishing or she was actively playing. So they understood and they related much more. Obviously, I relate to players in a way that I was a former player, but for not, I'd say most of them aren't really aware of that. If they Google me beforehand, maybe they figure it out, but it's not a topic of conversation that like, oh, I know how you feel. I didn't really try to insert myself at all. But Irina was good at just her like presence was enough to kind of ease any tension. We also made sure that people knew that they had the option to listen to it. It wasn't live. They had the option to listen to it after. And then when it came to like straight up reporting and stories and stuff like that, it was the tennis.com name and the brand that came with me. I mean, that kind of puts people at ease. You know, we're not out to get people. We're not out to tell you know, salacious stories. The hardest was probably, again, this is a World Team Tennis reference, but was when Daniel Collins left the bubble. And that was difficult because it's someone like you're spending time with, and you have to then be like, look, you broke these rules. Like, we have to write about it. But there was respect, you know, like I'm the reporter on the site and I have to tell a story that's happening right in front of me. I can't be like, well, you're nice, so I can't do this. But I think that with the podcast, it was definitely having Irina there. And just not being pushy. I'm not very pushy. Like I'm pretty chill. And if someone's like, I don't want to talk about that, I'm like, great, me neither. It's and I think also having us on Zoom, it helps a lot, because when you're on camera, you can tell people's facial expressions, you can read, and you can try to put them at ease with your own facial expressions and your own smiles and your own kind of behavior. So a lot of different factors, but also repetition, like doing it a million times and talking to people a million times really helps. I'm doing interviews now all the time with Universal Tennis of players that win our UTR Pro Tennis Tour events. They're kind of like prize money and like pro tournaments. We host like a bajillion. So I have a nice pool of players, and Taylor Townsend just won one. So that certain big names do play in our events, and I reach out, and it's a little bit different because like I don't think they're used. Taylor is, but some of our players aren't used to being reached out to and being interviewed. So it's been different to kind of talk to someone who's like really excited. They're like, oh my God, we're doing an interview. So it's or like young juniors. We also kind of, you know, people that are going to college or they're in college and speaking with them. It's a different vibe than trying to chase down, you know, a top 10 player who's sick of doing press or maybe is on edge, you know, or nervous. So it's just coming at them in an honest, candid way.
What does it mean to you, as you wrap up this conversation, to get recognized, to have players come back and say, oh, I love that interview that I did with Nina, or knowing who you are as far as why you're doing this and what's driving you, the idea that you are being recognized, how far does that go into continuing to push yourself forward and continuing to grow in this business?
It's tricky because my background is like a journalism degree from University of Mizzou. So I I think of myself as a journalist who should be unbiased and not part of the story. And I think things have changed in the past few years where journalists are becoming like famous or becoming part of the stories, or they're become their own brands. And there's a place for that. Obviously with social media, like you do, I mean, you do want to make money and you do want to have more jobs and have more opportunities, especially if you switching and trying to get into commentary and broadcast, you do become part of the story. So the tricky part is that my initial reaction is like not to be out there, and to just do my job and to keep my head down and just progress that way. But the media world has changed and opportunities have changed. So a big part of it is just like I said, saying yes to opportunities that make sense, keeping up my connections, and making sure that people know that I'm interested and available, and hoping to grow the game. And then finding different ways to tell stories. And now doing it at Universal Tennis is different because it's an array of players, like I said, from juniors to adults to pros and aspiring college players. So there's just a lot of biggest takeaway is a lot of opportunity in tennis that you might not initially see.
You forgot one word: talent. That's something else that you bring. And that's why you're going to continue to grow in this business. Nina Pantic, marketing manager, Universal Tennis. We talked camel riding, to her views on journalism, to her father's influence, to what she's overcome. We got a broad spectrum, hopefully captured the essence of who you are. That was the goal of this conversation. I'm Bryan Fenley. Nina, thanks again for doing this.
Thank you.